Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of our program. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we're privileged to have with us Ronald Ricardo, Managing Partner of Catalyst Consulting Group. Welcome to the program, Ronald.
Good morning.
Hey, so let's just jump right into just some good content about your book. You are a veteran author, author of your 8th book, and the latest one is titled Strategic Planning Unleashed. And I love action words. I love to see unleashed or power or things like that. And we love strategy. I think that can be a little overused, but when you couple it with unleashed, I'd love to hear the genesis of that title and what the premise is on your book.
Sure. Great question. You know, I've been fortunate over my 30-year career. I've been a corporate executive, and I've also worked with over 100 companies. And one of the things that became increasingly obvious to me over the years is that people were getting promoted to very, very senior levels. And many times the reason why they got promoted is because they were the best at putting out fires. You know, and the advantage of that was when there was a crisis, these people were the go-to people. The downside was many of them were not mentored to really understand how to develop a strategic plan, how to execute strategy, and sometimes even how to think strategically. They weren't really good chess players. So the genesis really was, I saw an unmet need. And being a consultant and being an entrepreneur, I gravitated towards, you know, making our offerings evolve over time to address that need.
You know, that's really, I love when I hear, I saw the need. You hear that a lot of times in the Shark Tanks, you know, with inventions. It interested me how you positioned that intro, which is people being taught or learning how to do strategic planning. So it made me think of this. Is there an application in a mentor-mentee relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mentoring relationship can occur a variety of ways. You know, in a corporate setting, if you're a senior executive, I think it's incumbent upon you to not only instill and provide role modeling, but also to help your direct reports to develop strategic thinking and ultimately business planning skills. As an external person, since I've been both, you know, you can do that through developing methodologies. The book I wrote really is a roadmap. It's a methodology and a toolkit. It can be included through or received through education. So there's a number of different channels. The real opportunity I have found, and perhaps you've seen this in your own career, is the vast majority of the articles and writing are more conceptual in nature. You know, here's a model. You nod your head and you say, okay, this makes logical sense. And then you get back to your office on Monday and you say, okay, so now how do I really go about analyzing competitors? How do I really go about identifying entrants? And that's where I think, you know, a lot of the gap has been and continues to be.
You know, I agree, and I think that relates back to that kind of the play on words, knowledge is power, and people start nodding their heads, yes, we know that it is, but knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential power because you have to put that knowledge into action, and that comes with implementation. So it's almost like you need that 30,000-foot view concept of the strategy so that people are nodding, going, yep, I need that. And then let's roll up our sleeves and break it down into tactical steps that can be executed. What do you find after you've laid out that strategy that would help a business or an organization start taking those steps to implement that strategic plan?
A number of things. One would be metrics. You know, think of measures as an opportunity to align people and resources. So we want to grow market share in this market segment. It's good to be able to translate that into a series of financial metrics and frankly, a balanced scorecard. So, yeah, the financial measures are important. There could be operational measures. There could be customer measures. There could be SAT measures. There could even be people measures. So the whole key is to make sure you have the right measures in place to focus people's efforts. And then also within those measures, have some measures that are predictive in nature. So let me give you an example. I was working with a pharmaceutical company, and I asked the senior executive team, what are the business drivers of revenue? And we had to define that. So I said, think about it. What's the cause and effect? What's the number one variable that drives revenues? I said, take out a Post-it note and write it down. And at a senior level, there was 11 people in the room, and I had 8 different answers to that one simple question. And really, when you peel back the onion, using the life sciences example, it's the number of calls the salespeople make to physicians is the business driver. So think about it. Historically, you can go back and say X number of calls results into a certain number of meetings. There's a close rate. There's an average sale. And if you multiply columns A times B times C times D, that's your top line. So if you're a senior executive and it's the middle of a quarter and you say, we're not going to hit the top line number, the answer is make more calls.
Yeah.
So it sounds
isn't it true that
obvious, but it's not.
Yep. Well, you know why? It is obvious, and people would recognize it, but they don't want to manage it. And was it Tom Peters or Peter Drucker? I keep getting the two confused. That said, "What gets managed gets done."
Exactly. I believe it was Drucker.
Yeah. So you can know all these things, and you can know that if you do the Stephen Covey start with the end in mind, and you want X number of sales, that means you need to do X number of whatever is right for your organization. In-person appointments. Well, to get an in-person appointment, you need to have X number of phone kind of warm-up interview chat conversations, and to get those, you need a certain number of whatever fits. But guess what? If each one of those steps are not managed, and what I would say is, I saw this. I mentioned this on an interview a few weeks ago, and then I saw it in action in person Monday in a meeting with one of my clients with all of their staff. And here's what happened. One of my favorite books is Whale Done, and it's a fictional book story about a management consultant that goes down to SeaWorld and watches Shamu, and he went up to the trainers afterwards and said, "How do you train these big beasts? What do you have, like an electric zapper, and you zap them to do that?" And they said, "Oh no, we just reward behavior we want repeated." And then the whole book, continues through that mindset. Well, I had mentioned that to my client, the CEO of this multi-million-dollar company, and I said, "Hey, look at some of these metrics in this sales graph that we did. The ultimate is to get this client, but look at some of these actions that are happening first." And this chart was showing that this salesperson made this many calls this week, and then this one had this many appointments this week, and then here's how many deals were closed or whatever. And I said, look at in this view, this kind of snapshot overview view, you can go in once a week or once a month and look and see which salespeople are kind of moving those metrics to move toward that end result. You can always reward how many deals got closed, of course, but why don't we reward how many calls got done, because you know that is a driver to the next step, which is a driver to closing the deal. And then Monday, right in the meeting was, hey, good job to so-and-so, he did this, and here's a gift card, you keep up the good work. And that's rewarding behaviors that you want to have replicated. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is that something that you teach your clients as well?
Yeah, you said a number of key things. Having the metrics is the first step. Understanding what drives what, the business drivers, that's also a key point. But really the secret sauce is exactly what you said. If you look at the best performing industries, when I say best performing, the ones that will not accept mediocrity, for example, investment banking, consulting, they by and large, they're up or out. You either make partner or you become unemployed. You look at the best performing companies, the Ciscos, the GEs of the world. they will not accept mediocrity. They have high metrics. And to your point, they tie those metrics to differentiating rewards. Every company I've worked with over the years, when I ask the question, do you have a pay-for-performance system? They invariably say yes. But you peel back the onion. Let me give you a scenario. You have 3 people, okay? They each make a base of $100,000. If I walk on water, I get a 4% raise, $4,000. If I'm an average performer, I get a pay increase of 3%, $3,000. And if I'm treading water, it's 2%. Now, do you really think a $1,000 difference is significant enough to do exactly what you said, drive the right kinds of behaviors to drive the right kinds of outputs you want? I would argue no. And if you compare that to the Big Five where I came out of, I never got less than a double-digit pay increase. You look at an investment bank, or you look at, other high-performing industries or companies, there's a direct link. They differentiate. So if you're not a good performer, sometimes you get 0, 0, 0. 0 increase, 0 bonus, 0 equity, and the next step is your future lies somewhere else.
Yeah, 0 opportunity to continue working for that organization.
Well said.
Yeah, that's a super point. I mean, so here's a question for you. What's the difference between strategic planning and financial forecasting?
There's not a standard definition, but here's how I would define it. Think of financial forecasting as the exercise you go through to say, look, last year we made X amount of dollars. And you take your best guess in saying, okay, this year with the economic conditions, the public policy that's been instituted, et cetera, I think we could make 3% more. And it's usually a financial forecasting modeling exercise, and it's usually driven by a CFO or a business owner. Think of strategic planning as I live in Connecticut, and in Connecticut we're either blessed or cursed, but we have a number of casinos. And think of strategic planning as going to the casino and saying, I'm going to place my bet on X. Mm-hmm. So you're really looking at things like if you're a big company or a mid-sized company, you're looking at what markets are we in? Which ones should we be in? Who are our customers? Which ones are most profitable? Which products and services give us the highest return? Which market segments have the largest size, the largest growth rate, the highest profitability? Which businesses should we exit? What should we divest? So the discussions are much more strategic in nature, whereas the metrics, the financials, are the outgrowth. Mm-hmm. It's more like a roadmap, and then the metrics become your compass.
Yeah, and it's almost it makes me think of this. People, I'll probably kill the quote, but you know what I mean, where people understand and are drawn to something emotionally, technically with numbers, but then they make a decision emotionally. So you need to have in mind facts tell, but stories sell. Well, in the example you just gave, I would say that you do that strategic planning with that evaluating and looking at your 80-20. What is the 20% that really, really, really produces back the 80% return monetarily or whatever that you're looking for? But then all of a sudden, then the qualifying factor is, let's see the how the financials play into that, because all of a sudden you could go, wait a minute here. We're spending 80% of our time on this sector of our business, and looking at the financials, it turned 4% of our profit margin. We got to flip that around, and now all of a sudden that helps you make the decision with that strategic plan.
I have a saying in our consulting company. It's called chasing the right rabbit. And many times, because companies aren't asking the right questions, or many times they're not collecting data in the right format, they're chasing the wrong rabbit. Prime example, I was working with a CEO and his direct reports, and this is about a $400 million company, and they're a division of a large company, but they own North America. And I asked the question, can you tell me which customers are most profitable? and I thought I was going to have to get a defibrillator out. It was a terrifying question because the answer was they don't collect data in that format. Can you tell me, which products are most profitable? I think I can. So they could certainly tell you top line, here's how much money we make. They could tell you sometimes in a market segment, in Latin America we make X, or Canada we make Y, but they weren't configuring the data in a way to answer the questions they needed. So one of the biggest learnings I've had in strategic planning is stop worrying about vision and mission. Start with what are the key questions you guys want to answer as a senior management team. And then once you agree on what those questions are, then you design a process for collecting the data in the right format to be able to pony up and answer those questions.
So I always like to hear the word process, because the way that I love seeing things happen is when you are doing something, have something running in the back of your mind. Could I do this faster, better, stronger, more efficiently? Can I set up a process for that? Can there be some automations? So when you say process, can you go a little deeper on what a couple of the recommended steps would be for that process to be established?
Sure. Let's start with it in chunks. I think channel one is you need to look outside of your organization. And if you're a marketing-driven company, you typically do that naturally. But keep in mind, there are some companies that are engineering-driven or finance-driven. So you get people with their heart in the right place, and they say, wow, this is a cool product to develop. But nobody really asks the question, is there a market for it? Is it an unmet need? Is it white space? Is it blue ocean? So I think the first thing is to look outside. And depending on the size of your organization, you will mom and pop or a small cap or very large, you have to say, what are the variables that are most impactful to my organization, good and bad? So it could be customers. It could be competitors. It could be disruptive technology. And you need to then start to collect data on those variables that are critical to the success of your organization. So the first look is external, and it could be anything from competitors to unions to potential new legislation or regulation and everything in between. Instability of a country that you're doing work in. Prime example, there are certain industries and certain products that are really can have a profound effect on your organization and potentially turn your lights out. Prime example, let's say you are a manufacturer of munitions for the Navy, and you're used to making shells. Well, what's a possible disruptive technology? They have a rail gun now that's pretty close to coming out. And what a rail gun is they're not firing shells that blow up. They're firing this hunk of metal, and just the speed of the metal creates an explosive force. They're much cheaper than shells, they're more accurate than shells, and they're more inexpensive than shells. So if you're worrying about making traditional trajectories, if this technology comes to fruition, it can put your lights out. And I think that's, the external, the worst case scenario, the thing that should give you chest pains. Once you have the external done, you need to look internal. What are we really good at? What's our core competency? Do we have the right infrastructure in place? Do we have, is our business model correct? Do we have the right leaders? So that will give you a sense of opportunity, external, internal capabilities, and then you want to start to identify alternatives. What are different ways that we can grow the business? And then evaluate those alternatives. And as you go to pick one, what I find being very useful is to develop pro forma income. So the answer is if we go here and we do these things, here is what we would anticipate in terms of revenues, and here's the costs necessary to make this happen. And we identify the underlying assumptions. So now we're not playing pin the tail on the donkey, but we've done some level of due diligence. So the numbers are not just a creative writing exercise. They're based on an analysis of data and people's industry expertise, et cetera. Once you have that, then you segue to what you and I have been talking about, strategy execution. You plug your gaps so you can execute. So if you have a bunch of strategies and projects, you might want to come up with a PMO. You might want to make sure you have the right leaders in place. You might have competency gaps, so maybe you need to train people. Do you have the right structure? Do your HR practices, to your point, drive the behaviors you want? Is your talent acquisition filling in gaps you have? And that will ultimately help you execute.
I think that we could probably continue overwhelming people and continue talking for hours on end. This feels like a masterclass in strategic planning. So why don't we just wrap up by saying, how can people learn more? What would be a great way for someone to engage with you and learn a little bit more about your consulting?
Sure. Well, you can certainly contact me through my email address. It's RRECARDO at catalystconsultinggroup.org. You can Google my name. I've written so many books. I'm all over Amazon. So that would be a second avenue. Or you just come to our website and take a look at the services we offer, which are inclusive of, how to grow the company, how to improve the companies, and also the human element.
Super. And to clarify, when people are Googling your name, I want to make 2 points. Number one, let's make sure they have the correct spelling. So it's Ronald Ricardo, RECARDO. And then the other point is, I'm sure you know this, but it's so interesting that there was a study that was done that 357 people were asked, when you hear about a business or a brand, whether it's an advertisement on the radio or a personal referral or something that you need, what do you do next? And the very 87% of them said, we Google them. So we might think as business owners, people need SEO and organic and all that, and that's an element of marketing, and that's wonderful. But the most powerful thing we can focus on is when people Google our name and our business. So Ronald Ricardo, Catalyst Consulting Group, what comes up? We've already heard you say your books and your content so wonderful, but if we can leave people with the thought of what will come up and what kind of authority positioning comes up when people Google our name and our business, we want that to be really powerful, that resonates well with our target audience. So with that, we'll wrap up and say, anyone wanting to learn more, Google Ronald Ricardo or go to catalystconsultinggroup.org. Thank you so much for your time on the call today, Ronald.
Thank you very much for your time.